I've listened to Jennifer Chen's final 12 seconds of audio over 1,000 times, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, what killed my hunting partner in those Ohio woods wasn't a bear, wasn't a mountain lion, and it sure as hell wasn't human. The coroner said her neck was snapped with over 2,000 pounds of force, the kind of pressure that shouldn't exist in any known animal in North America, and when you hear the vocalization it made right before her phone hit the ground, every hair on your body will stand up. But here's what keeps me awake at night. If this thing was capable of killing her in under 2 seconds, why did it take the time to carefully cover her body with branches afterward? Before we get into what happened that day, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see the audio analysis we do at the end of this video. Trust me on that. My name is Mike Chin. The woman who died out there was my wife, Jennifer. We'd been married 8 years when it happened. 8 good years. People always ask me why we hunted together, like it's strange for a married couple to share that hobby. But for us it made sense. We met at an archery range outside Columbus back in 2011. She could outshoot me then and she could outshoot me the day she died. We were a team. We knew what we were doing out there. We lived in Athens County, Ohio, in a small house about 15 minutes outside the town limits. Rural area. Lots of trees. Lots of deer. Every October and November, we'd take our bows out to Wayne National Forest. We had our spots, places we'd been going for years. Good areas where the deer moved through on their way to water. We weren't trophy hunters. We filled our freezer and that was enough. It was about being outside together, about the quiet, about watching the sun come up through the branches. October of 2019, we'd been scouting our usual area for a few weeks. We had 3 trail cameras set up along a ridgeline where we'd seen deer sign. Tracks, droppings, rubs on the trees where bucks had scraped their antlers. The cameras were motion activated, took a photo every time something walked past. Most of what we got was deer. A couple of small bucks, nothing huge. Some raccoons. A fox one time. Normal stuff. But there was one frame that didn't sit right with me. I didn't think much of it at the time. Wish I had. It was from late October, maybe a week before opening day of bow season. The photo was taken just after dark, around 7:30 at night. You could see a deer in the foreground, a doe looking off to the right side of the frame. Her ears were up, alert. And at the very edge of the picture, back in the trees, there was this shadow. Big shadow. Taller than it should have been. The camera had caught it mid-step, so the whole image was blurred. I showed it to Jen and she said it was probably just another deer passing through at a weird angle. The motion sensor can be glitchy sometimes, catching things in strange ways. I agreed with her. Filed it away and forgot about it. Opening day of bow season that year was November 2nd. We both had to work so we couldn't get out there. But November 3rd was a Sunday and we had it clear. The weather was perfect. Cold but not freezing. Low 40s. Clear skies. No wind. Perfect for sitting in a tree stand and waiting. Deer move better when it's cold and quiet like that. We left the house around 3:30 in the afternoon. It's about a 40-minute drive from our place to the spot we hunt. We took my truck, parked at the usual pull-off on a Forest Service road. Nobody else was around. We geared up, checked our bows, made sure we had everything. Jen always wore this bright orange beanie, even though it wasn't required for bow season. She said it made her feel safer. I can still see it sitting on her head, that stupid bright hat, her dark hair tucked under it. We'd planned to split up like we always did. I had a tree stand about half a mile north on the ridge. She had hers about half a mile south, down closer to a creek bed. We'd been using those same 2 spots for 3 seasons. We knew the land. We knew how to get in and out in the dark. The plan was to hunt till last light around 6:15, then meet back at the truck. Before we split up, she kissed me on the cheek. Said, "See you in a few hours. Don't fall asleep up there." I told her the same thing I always told her. Be safe. Text me if you get anything. She smiled, turned, and started walking south through the trees. I watched her go until the orange beanie disappeared behind the oaks. That was the last time I saw my wife alive. I headed north to my stand. Got up the tree around 4:15. Clipped in my safety harness. Set my bow on the hook. Pulled out my phone and sent Jen a text. "Are you in your stand yet?" She replied a few seconds later. "Yeah, I just got settled. Quiet so far." I put the phone on silent and settled in to wait. I had my GoPro mounted on my chest. I always recorded my hunts just in case I got something worth keeping. The camera was rolling. At 4:47 I checked my phone again. Send her another text. "Seeing anything?" No reply. That wasn't unusual. She was probably just focused, watching the woods. Sometimes we wouldn't text at all during a hunt. But something about the quiet that afternoon felt different. Heavier. The birds had stopped singing around 5 o'clock. That happens sometimes when a predator moves through, but it usually doesn't last long. This silence stayed. At 5:15 I texted her again. Still nothing. I stared at my phone screen waiting for those 3 little dots to show up, the ones that mean someone's typing back. They never came. I told myself she was being smart, staying quiet, not moving. You don't check your phone when a deer is close. That's basic hunting sense. But a knot was forming in my stomach anyway, that feeling you get when something's off but you can't name it yet. The woods around me were still dead silent. No squirrels chattering. No birds calling. Nothing. Just my own breathing and the occasional creak of the tree stood when I shifted my weight. I'd been hunting these woods for years and I'd never felt anything like this. The air felt thick like it was pressing down on me. I kept scanning the forest floor below, looking for movement, for deer, for anything. Empty. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. 3 loud knocks, wood on wood, coming from the south. From Jennifer's direction. Knock. 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 Evenly spaced, deliberate. My first thought was that she was signaling me somehow, maybe banging her bow against a tree to get my attention. But that didn't make sense. We'd never used knocks as signals. And these were too loud, too deep. They echoed through the trees like someone hitting a baseball bat against a thick trunk. I pulled out my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. My heart started beating faster. I tried texting again. Jen, you okay? The message was delivered but not read. The knocking had stopped. The silence came back heavier than before. I looked at my watch. 5:23. The last light wasn't for another hour, but something in my gut told me to get down. I grabbed my bow, unclipped my harness and started climbing down the ladder sticks as fast as I could without falling. My GoPro was still recording on my chest. You can hear my breathing on the footage, fast and shallow. You can hear my boots hitting each rung of the ladder. When I got to the ground, I started moving south through the woods toward her stand. I wasn't being quiet anymore. I was pushing through branches, stepping on every stick in my path. I kept calling her name. Jennifer. Jen. Nothing came back but my own voice bouncing off the trees. The walk to her stand normally took about 15 minutes if you went slow and careful. I made it in 8. I knew I was getting close when I saw the big oak tree she always used, the one with the double trunk that made it easy to climb. But something was wrong. Her climbing sticks, the metal steps she used to get up the tree, were scattered on the ground. Not fallen. Scattered. 3 of them were lying in the leaves 15 to 20 feet away from the base of the tree, like they'd been ripped off and thrown. I stopped walking. My legs felt like they'd filled with concrete. Jennifer's name came out of my mouth quieter this time, almost a whisper. The tree stand was still up there, attached to the trunk about 18 feet off the ground. But it was empty. Her safety harness was dangling down, unclipped. And then I saw her bow on the ground at the base of the tree, lying in the leaves. Not broken, not damaged, just lying there like she'd set it down gently. Jennifer would never leave her bow on the ground like that. Never. Next to the bow was her phone. Face down in the dirt. The screen cracked. I bent down and picked it up with shaking hands. The screen was still lit up. Still on. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I turned it over and saw that it had been recording a voice memo. The recording had stopped at 12 seconds, but the app was still open. I could see the little sound wave pattern frozen on the screen. My thumb hovered over the play button. I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Not standing there alone. I looked around the base of the tree. That's when I saw the blood. Not a little bit. A lot. Dark red, almost black in the fading light. It was splattered on the leaves, on the bark of the tree, soaked into the dirt. Too much blood. Way too much. My vision started to tunnel. I had to grab the tree trunk to stay standing. There was a trail. The blood led away from the tree, heading uphill into thicker forest. And next to the blood trail were marks in the dirt. Drag marks. Something heavy had been pulled through the leaves. And something else. Prints. Huge prints in the soft earth next to a rotted log. I got down on my knees to look closer. They weren't deer tracks. They weren't bear tracks. They were shaped like feet. Human feet. But massive. Longer than my boot by at least 6 inches. 5 toes. A clear heel impression. The stride between prints was impossible, 6 feet or more. My brain couldn't process it. I was a hunter. I knew animal tracks. I'd seen bear, deer, coyote, turkey, and everything that lived in these woods. These didn't match anything. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The photo came out blurred. I took 3 more. Then I stood up and looked at the blood trail again, heading uphill into the darkness between the trees. I should have followed it right then. I should have run after her. but my body wouldn't move. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run the other direction, to get back to the truck, to get out of these woods. Instead I stood there frozen, holding her cracked phone in one hand and my bow in the other, staring at those impossible footprints while the last light drained out of the sky. I don't know how long I stood there holding her phone. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Time went strange. My thumb kept hovering over that play button on the voice memo app. Part of me needed to hear it. Part of me knew that once I pressed play, everything would change. There'd be no going back to not knowing. I pressed play. The first 3 seconds were just breathing. Jennifer's breathing. Steady and controlled. The kind of breathing you do when you're watching something, when you're trying to stay calm and quiet. I could hear the faint rustle of her jacket against the microphone. Then her breath caught. A sharp inhale, like she'd just seen something that didn't make sense. Her voice came through the speaker, confused and scared at the same time. What the hell is that? My own breath stopped. I turned the volume up as high as it would go and held the phone close to my ear. The next sound was branches breaking. Not little twigs. Big branches. The kind that only break when something heavy pushes through them. And it was close. The microphone picked up a deep rushing sound, like something large moving fast through brush. Whatever it was coming at her. At 8 seconds, Jennifer screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was short and sharp and full of terror. No, stay back. Her voice was high and tight. I'd never heard her sound like that. Not once in 8 years. Then came a massive impact. The whole recording shook with it. You could hear the tree stand rattle and creak like something had just slammed into the tree or grabbed onto it. The metal groaned. Jennifer made a sound I can't describe, something between a gasp and a choke. At 10 seconds, wood splintered. Loud cracks like someone snapping thick boards in half. Jennifer's scream cut off mid-sound and turned into this wet gurgling noise that made my stomach flip. It lasted less than a second. Then silence. Not complete silence. There was breathing. But it wasn't hers. This breathing was deep and slow and heavy. Animal breathing. But not like any animal I knew. Each breath sounded like it was coming from a chest the size of a barrel. Then it made a sound. A vocalization. Low and rough, almost like a growl, but with more shape to it. It had a pattern, like it was trying to say something. The sound was so deep it made the phone speaker buzz and distort. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then the phone hit the ground. The impact made a sharp crack through the speaker. After that, the audio kept recording, but all you could hear was muffled scraping and dragging sounds. Branches moving. Something heavy being pulled across the forest floor. That went on for almost 4 more minutes before the recording stopped. I played it again. And again. And again. Each time I heard something new that made it worse. The speed of the attack. The sound of her neck. That breathing that was too big to be human but too controlled to be a simple animal. And that vocalization, that sound it made right after. It wasn't random. It had intention. It sounded almost like words in some language I didn't know. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I steadied myself against the tree and made myself look at the screen one more time. The voice memo app showed the waveform of the recording. You could see where her voice spiked when she screamed. You could see the massive spike when the impact happened. And you could see that low rumbling section at the end where it made that sound. I took screenshots of everything. Then I opened my own phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I tried to explain what happened, but the words came out wrong. My wife. Something took her. Oh God, there's so much blood. The dispatcher kept asking me to slow down, to tell her where I was, if my wife was injured. I couldn't make my mouth work right. I'm in Wayne National Forest. Her stand. She's gone. There's blood everywhere. Something attacked her. The dispatcher asked what attacked her. Was it a bear? Was it another person? I looked down at those massive footprints in the dirt. I looked at the blood trail leading uphill. I heard that sound in my head again, that deep vocalization that came right after my wife stopped screaming. I don't know, I told her. I don't know what it was. The dispatcher said, stay where you are, don't move, help is coming. She kept me on the line. Keep asking questions. I answered them on autopilot while staring at Jennifer's bow lying in the leaves. 20 minutes later I heard voices calling through the woods. Flashlight beams cut through the trees. 2 sheriff deputies came crashing through the brush with their hands on their gun belts. One of them was young, maybe mid-20s. The other was older with gray hair and a thick neck. They saw the blood and their whole posture changed. The older one got on his radio immediately. We need search and rescue. We need dogs. We have a possible attack victim, female, missing, significant blood loss at the scene. The younger deputy asked me what happened. I handed him Jennifer's phone. I told him to listen to the recording. He looked at the older deputy who nodded. The young guy pressed play and held the phone up between them. I watched their faces as they listened. Both of them went pale. When it got to the part where the thing made that sound, the older deputy's jaw clenched. He looked at me with different eyes. Eyes that were trying to figure out if I was crazy or if he just heard what he thought he heard. "What the hell was that?" the younger one said. His voice cracked a little. The older deputy didn't answer. He just looked out into the dark woods beyond our flashlight beams and his hand stayed on his gun. Within an hour, the woods were full of people. Sheriff's vehicles lined the Forest Service road with their lights spinning red and blue through the trees. Search and rescue teams arrived with equipment and dogs. Big German shepherds trained to track people. The handlers geared them up and brought them over to Jennifer's tree stand. They let the dogs smell her bow, her phone, pieces of her gear. The dogs picked up the scent immediately and started pulling toward the blood trail heading uphill. But then something happened that the handlers said they'd never seen before. About 200 yards up the trail, all 3 dogs stopped at the same time. Just froze. Their ears went flat against their heads. One of them started whining, a high-pitched sound like it was scared. Another one pulled backwards so hard it nearly choked itself on the leash. The third dog sat down and refused to move. The handlers tried everything. They coaxed them. They gave commands. Nothing worked. Those dogs would not go another step forward. One handler, a woman in her 50s who'd been doing this for 20 years, looked at the sheriff and said she'd never seen her dog act like this. Something up there scared them badly. The sheriff made the call to keep going without the dogs. A team of 12 volunteers spread out in a line and moved uphill through the darkness. I went with them. Nobody tried to stop me. We had flashlights and headlamps cutting through the trees. Every 50 feet or so someone would call out Jennifer's name. The blood trail was easy to follow at first. Dark drops on the leaves. Smears on tree bark. But the further we went, the thinner it got. After a quarter mile it disappeared completely. We searched for 3 hours. The temperature dropped into the 30s. Our breath came out in clouds. My feet were numb. My voice was raw from yelling her name over and over into the dark. Around midnight the sheriff called us back. Said we'd resume at first light when we could see better. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to leave her out there. But I couldn't feel my fingers anymore and I could barely stand. 2 deputies practically carried me back to the command post they'd set up near the trucks. They wrapped me in one of those emergency blankets and sat me in the back of an ambulance. A paramedic checked my vitals and asked if I needed anything. I just shook my head. The older deputy from earlier, his name tag said Morrison, came over and asked if he could talk to me. He had a notebook in his hand. He asked me to walk him through everything again from the beginning. What time we split up. When I last heard from Jennifer. What I found at her stand. I told him everything except the part about the footprints. I don't know why I left that out. Maybe I thought he wouldn't believe me. Maybe I was scared of what it meant. He asked about the recording again. Asked if I'd heard any sounds like that before in these woods. I said no. Never. He wrote something down and then looked at me for a long time without saying anything. Finally he asked if Jennifer and I had been having any problems. If there was anyone who might want to hurt her. I understood what he was really asking. He was wondering if I did something to her. I told him we were fine. We were happy. We'd been planning a trip to the Smoky Mountains next month for our anniversary. He nodded and closed his notebook. Said he had to ask. At 6 in the morning when the sun started coming up, the search teams went back out. This time they brought in cadaver dogs. I knew what that meant. They weren't looking for Jennifer alive anymore. I stayed at the command post because Morrison told me I had to. Said I couldn't be part of the active search. So I sat there on the tailgate of my truck drinking bad coffee from a thermos someone handed me and watching teams disappear into the woods. At 9:42 my phone rang. It was Morrison. He said they found her. His voice was flat and careful. He said I needed to come identify the body but warned me that it wasn't going to be easy to see. A deputy drove me up an old logging road I didn't even know existed. We parked and walked another 100 yards into the forest. There was yellow tape everywhere marking off the scene. Officers standing around looking pale and sick. Morrison met me at the tape line and put his hand on my shoulder. He asked me one more time if I was sure I wanted to do this. I nodded. She was lying in a small clearing under a stand of pine trees. Someone had covered her with branches and leaves. Not randomly scattered. Placed. Like someone had tried to hide her or protect her or both. The branches were arranged almost gently. When they pulled the branches back I saw her orange beanie first. Then her face. Her eyes were closed. For just a second I thought she might be sleeping. Then I saw her neck. It was wrong. Bent at an angle that wasn't possible. The coroner arrived an hour later. Older man with white hair and glasses. He did his examination right there while I sat 50 feet away with my back against a tree. I heard him talking to Morrison in a low voice. Heard words like massive trauma and incredible force. When he was done, he came over and sat down next to me. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said he'd been doing this job for 34 years and he'd never seen injuries like this. He said whatever broke her neck had applied more than 2,000 pounds of pressure. Snapped her spine like a dry stick. He said it would have been instant. She didn't suffer. I asked him what could do. He looked at me and I could see he was struggling with how to answer. A bear maybe, he finally said. But his voice didn't have any confidence in it. Then he added something that made my blood go cold. He said there were marks around the site. Footprints. Very large ones. Not bear prints. He'd already taken photos and measurements. The prints were 18 inches long with 5 distinct toes and a humanoid arch. The stride length between them was over 6 feet. He said the sheriff's office was bringing in a wildlife expert from Ohio State to take a look. Morrison came over after the coroner left. He had his notebook out again. He asked me if I'd noticed any prints when I first found Jennifer's stand. I hesitated. Then I told him yes. I'd seen them. Big ones. Shaped like feet. He nodded slowly like that's what he'd expected me to say. He asked why I hadn't mentioned it the night before. I told him the truth. I didn't know how to explain what I'd seen without sounding crazy. He almost smiled at that. Then he showed me his phone. On the screen was a photo of one of the prints. Clear as day in the dirt. 5 toes. Deep impressions. Too big to be human. Too human to be anything else. He said the official report was going to list this as an animal attack, species unknown. He said that's all he could put down on paper. But then he looked me in the eyes and said he'd worked in these woods for 20 years and he'd heard stories. Stories that people don't talk about unless they've seen things themselves. He said he believed me. He said he was sorry for my loss. They brought Jennifer's body out on a stretcher just after noon. I followed the ambulance back to town in my truck. The whole drive I kept hearing that sound from the recording. That deep vocalization right after she stopped breathing. I kept seeing those footprints in the dirt. And I kept thinking about how someone or something had covered her body with branches like it was trying to take care of her after what it had done. 3 days after Jennifer's funeral, a man showed up at my door. His name was Dr. Robert Brennan. He was a wildlife biologist from Ohio State, but he'd spent the last 15 years researching something else. Something most scientists won't touch. He'd heard about what happened through contacts in the sheriff's department. He asked if he could talk to me about what I'd found that day. I almost closed the door in his face. I was tired of talking. Tired of questions. But something about the way he asked made me let him in. We sat at my kitchen table and I showed him everything. The photos I'd taken of the prints. The screenshots of Jennifer's voice memo. He listened to the audio 3 times with his eyes closed and headphones on. When he was done, he took the headphones off and just sat there for a long time staring at the table. Then he asked if he could show me something. He pulled out his laptop and opened a folder full of audio files. Said these were recordings that had been collected over the last 50 years from different parts of North America. Mostly the Pacific Northwest, but some from the Appalachians and the Midwest too. He called them vocalizations. He played the first one. It was from 1974, recorded by hunters in Northern California. The sound was rough and low, almost like speech but not quite. Fast syllables that didn't match any known language. People called it samurai chatter because of the rhythm. It sounded aggressive and urgent. He played another one from 2006, this one from Eastern Kentucky. Similar pattern. Deep voice, fast delivery, impossible to understand but definitely structured like communication. Then he played a third recording and my whole body went cold. It was from 1994, recorded by a hiker in Wayne National Forest. The same forest where Jennifer died. The same woods we'd been hunting in for years. The vocalization in that recording had the same tone, the same deep rumbling quality as the sound on Jennifer's phone. Not identical but close enough that you could tell it came from the same kind of throat. The same kind of creature. Dr. Brennan pulled up a spectrogram on his screen. It showed the sound waves as colored patterns. He pointed to Jennifer's recording and then to the one from 1994. The frequency ranges matched. Both sounds came from something with a vocal structure unlike anything documented in known animals. The wavelength suggested a chest cavity and lung capacity far beyond human. He estimated based on the acoustics that whatever made these sounds weighed somewhere between 400 and 600 pounds and stood at least 7 to 8 feet tall. I asked him what he thought it was. He didn't dance around it. He said Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever name you wanted to use. He said the creature had been documented in Ohio going back hundreds of years. Native tribes had stories about them. Called them different names. Forest people. Elder brothers. There'd been over 200 reported sightings in Ohio since 1970. Most were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. But a handful, maybe 10 or 15, came with physical evidence. Footprints. Hair samples that didn't match known animals. Sounds like the ones we were listening to. He opened another file on his computer. Police photos from the scene where they'd found Jennifer. He had copies that Morrison had sent him. The footprints were clear in the images. Dr. Brennan had done measurements based on the scale markers in the photos. 18.3 inches long. 7.2 inches wide at the ball of the foot. 5 toes with a distinct separation. A flexible midfoot that showed compression. He said these were consistent with hundreds of other documented prints found across North America. The stride length of 6 feet indicated bipedal locomotion by something extremely tall with long legs. I asked him why it happened. Why Jennifer? He pulled up a map on his laptop showing Wayne National Forest. He'd marked the location where she was attacked with a red dot. Then he showed me reports from that same area. 4 sightings within 2 miles over the past decade. 3 of them described a large dark figure moving through the trees near a specific ridgeline. One report from 2017 mentioned finding a bedding site. Large flattened areas in dense vegetation. Food scraps. A pile of bones from small animals. Dr. Brennan thought Jennifer had set up her tree stand too close to a nesting area. Maybe within 100 yards. He said these creatures were territorial, especially females with young. During fall they were more aggressive because they were preparing for winter and protecting their food sources. If the creature perceived Jennifer as a threat to its territory or its offspring, it would have reacted with extreme force. The attack would have been defensive, not predatory. That's why it covered her body afterward. It wasn't trying to feed. It was removing a threat and then showing what he called post-aggression behavior. Almost like regret or confusion about what it had done. That detail haunted me more than anything else. The idea that this thing killed my wife in under 2 seconds because it felt threatened, and then carefully covered her body with branches like it understood what it had done. Like it had some kind of awareness or conscience. Dr. Brennan asked if he could use the audio recording for his research. He promised he wouldn't share my name or the exact location. He said recordings like this were incredibly rare and valuable for understanding these creatures. I told him no. I told him if that recording got out, these woods would be flooded with people looking for this thing. Hunters. Thrill seekers. People who wanted proof or a trophy. He nodded. Said he understood. Then he asked me one more question. He asked if I thought the creature meant to kill her or if the attack happened so fast it didn't realize its own strength. I told him I didn't know. I told him I'd never know. After he left, I sat alone with Jennifer's phone. I pulled up the recording one more time and listened to those 12 seconds again. I tried to hear it differently now. Not as a monster attacking my wife but as a scared animal defending its home. I tried to make it make sense. But all I heard was Jennifer's scream cutting off and that wet sound when her neck snapped. All I saw were those massive footprints in the dirt and her body covered with branches in a clearing that wasn't hers. The official death certificate says animal attack, species unknown. The insurance company fought me for months before finally paying out. Most people in town think it was a bear. A few think it was a mountain lion even though they're not supposed to be in Ohio. Nobody except Morrison and Dr. Brennan, and now you know what I really think happened out there. I haven't been back to those woods. Haven't touched my bow. I sold the truck because I couldn't stand looking at it. Some nights I still wake up at 3 in the morning and hear that sound in my head. That deep vocalization right before the phone hit the ground. I've listened to it so many times I can hear every detail. The tone. The rhythm. The way it almost sounds like words. Dr. Brennan thought it might have been a warning call. A signal to others nearby that there was danger or that it had dealt with a threat. But sometimes when I play it back in the dark I hear something else. Something that sounds almost like surprise or fear. Like maybe in that split second after it snapped her neck, it realized what it had done. And maybe that's why it stayed. Why did it cover her? Why didn't it just leave her there broken in the leaves? I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I don't know if understanding why it happened changes anything. Jennifer is still gone. Those woods still have something living in them that can kill a human being in under 2 seconds without even meaning to. And somewhere out there, maybe in that same cave or nesting site, that creature is still living its life. Still protecting its territory. Still making those sounds in the dark that people like me will hear and never forget. The question that keeps me awake isn't whether Bigfoot exists. I know it does. I've heard it. I've seen its footprints. I've felt what it can do. The question is what happens next time someone walks too close to where it lives. What happens when the next hunter sets up their stand in the wrong spot? Because now I know these things are real and they're not the peaceful forest giants people want them to be. They're powerful and territorial and capable of unbelievable violence when they feel threatened. And there's nothing we can do to stop them because officially they don't exist. Officially my wife was killed by an unknown animal. Officially those 18-inch footprints and that vocalization on the recording don't mean anything. But I know better. And now so do you.